Have you ever felt like this? As if, no matter where you look, what you do, a dense fog of dissatisfaction, of a deep, unsettling longing, simply doesn't lift? As if you're running on a treadmill, exhausted, but never getting anywhere. If this feeling resonates in some corner of your soul, know that you are not alone. And what if I told you there's a philosophy, a worldview proposed by a thinker often called a pessimist, Arthur Schopenhauer, who not only understands this pain but points to a radical way of disappearing from it? Not a physical disappearance, of course, but a vanishing from the clutches of what causes us so much suffering, so that then, and only then, we can rebuild ourselves in a way we might never have imagined possible. Would you have the courage to explore this idea, even if it challenges everything you believe about yourself and about life? Welcome to a journey into the heart of Schopenhauer's thought, an invitation to understand how, paradoxically, one must vanish to truly find oneself, to remake oneself. For many, the name Schopenhauer evokes the image of a grumpy old philosopher, the herald of pessimism. And indeed, he didn't sugarcoat things. For Schopenhauer, the engine that drives all existence, from the tiniest particle to the complexity of human life, is something he called the will. Think of the will not as your conscious desire like, I want a coffee now. No, it's a blind, irrational force, an incessant will to live, a fundamental drive that permeates everything. It's the hunger that moves us, the desire that stirs us, the ambition that consumes us. And here's the crux of the problem, according to him. This will is, by its very nature, insatiable. Imagine a bottomless pit. Every satisfied desire is like a drop of water you throw into it. For a moment, perhaps, a brief sensation of relief. But the pit remains empty, crying out for more. The will is never content. We achieve something, and immediately a new desire arises. We buy the object of our dreams, and the joy fades, giving way to boredom or the search for something new. We love, and the fear of loss or the pain of disappointment haunts us. Life, for Schopenhauer, is this constant oscillation between wanting and boredom, between the pain of lack and the emptiness of achievement. Sounds bleak, doesn't it? And it is. But recognizing this dynamic is the first step, the honest diagnosis without which no cure, no transformation is possible. How many times have you caught yourself thinking, if I just get this, I'll be happy? And how many times has that happiness, when achieved, proven fleeting, almost a mirage? If you've ever felt that, you're beginning to understand Schopenhauer's will in action. This will is not something external to us. It is us, in our rawest essence. It's the constant affirmation of our I, our ego, with its appetites and aversions. It's this identification with the individual will that keeps us trapped in this cycle of suffering. We want, we struggle, we suffer, and we repeat. Schopenhauer saw nature around us as a mirror of this constant struggle. Every animal hunting to survive, every plant competing for light and space. A silent, perpetual war, driven by this blind will to exist, to assert itself. And we humans, with our acute consciousness, feel this struggle even more intensely as we are able to anticipate suffering, to remember past pain, to project future longings. We are, in a way, the animals most tormented by the will. So, if the will is the source of suffering, what to do? Fight it with more will? That would be like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Schopenhauer's answer is surprising and, for many, counterintuitive. One must deny the will, disappear from it. And here, it's crucial to understand that this disappearing is not physical suicide. Schopenhauer was explicitly against it, seeing it as a final, desperate affirmation of the will, an attempt to escape suffering without having resolved its root cause. The disappearance he speaks of is an internal process, a gradual dissolution of the ego and its tyrannical desires. It's a quieting of that inner voice that screams, I want, I need, I am. But how is this done? How does one quiet such a primordial force? Schopenhauer points to a few paths, a few chinks of light in this seemingly desolate landscape. The first, and perhaps the most accessible for many of us, is aesthetic contemplation, the experience of art. When you lose yourself in the beauty of a piece of music, in the depth of a painting, in the power of a poem, what happens to yourself? For a few moments, your personal desires, your worries, your fears, they quiet down. You become a pure subject of knowledge, a clear mirror reflecting the Platonic idea, the universal essence present in the work of art. In these moments, the individual will is silenced. You disappear as a desiring individual and merge with something larger, more universal. It's a temporary relief, an oasis in the desert of wanting, but it shows us that it's possible to transcend, even if briefly, the tyranny of the will. Think about the last time a work of art captivated you. Where was your to-do list? Your anxieties? For a moment, they vanished, didn't they? That's a glimpse of what Schopenhauer proposes. If you're finding value in this reflection, if you feel these words touch on something deep within you, how about leaving a like on this video? It's a simple way to tell us we're on the right track, and it helps this message reach others who may also be seeking this understanding. Continuing our journey, another path Schopenhauer pointed to is the practice of compassion. When we feel genuine compassion for another being, we transcend the limits of our own ego. The other's pain becomes, in a way, our pain. We recognize in the other the same fundamental suffering that resides in us, the same will-seeking, struggling, and suffering. This identification breaks down the barriers of individualism. Schopenhauer said that compassion is the basis of morality. By acting with compassion, we are, in a way, denying the selfish will that drives us to put our interests above everything and everyone else. We realize that the I and the other are not so distinct. We are all manifestations of the same universal will, sharing the same existential burden. By alleviating another's suffering, even minimally, we also alleviate the weight of our own individual will. It's as if, for a moment, the focus shifts from our navel and expands to embrace the world. And in that embrace, there's a kind of liberation. Have you ever noticed how a genuine act of kindness, expecting nothing in return, can bring a sense of inner peace, of lightness? That's the selfish will quieting down. But the most radical path, the deepest disappearance, is what Schopenhauer calls the negation of the will to live, achieved through asceticism. Here, we're not talking about simple deprivations or religious masochism. It's a conscious, deliberate renunciation of the will's impulses. It's recognizing the illusory nature of worldly satisfactions and gradually detaching from them. This involves voluntary celibacy, self-imposed poverty, fasting, the search for silence, and stillness. Does it sound extreme? For our society focused on consumption, immediate pleasure, constant self-affirmation, it certainly does. But for Schopenhauer, this is the path to the nothingness that, paradoxically, is everything. This nothingness is not annihilation, absolute and terrifying emptiness. It is rather liberation from the will itself, the end of the cycle of desire and suffering. It's a state of serenity, of peace that transcends rational understanding, comparable to Buddhist nirvana, a philosophy, by the way, that Schopenhauer deeply admired and saw as very close to his own. When the will falls silent, what remains? Not the individual we knew, with their longings and fears, but a pure consciousness, free from the burden of wanting. It's as if the individual drop of water finally dissolves into the ocean. The ego disappears, but something much greater, an imperturbable peace, takes its place. It's the final transformation. You might be thinking, this is too radical, impossible for me. And Schopenhauer would understand. He himself admitted not having fully reached this ascetic state. But the beauty of his philosophy lies not only in the final destination, but in the journey. In the understanding it offers us about our own nature and the sources of our discontent. Even if we don't embrace complete asceticism, we can apply these principles in our daily lives. We can cultivate moments of aesthetic contemplation, practice compassion more earnestly, question our incessant desires. We can learn to observe the will within us without being completely dominated by it. Think of small ways to disappear in your everyday life. Maybe it's turning off your phone notifications for a few hours and just being present. Maybe it's resisting an impulse for unnecessary consumption and observing what happens to that desire. Maybe it's dedicating time to truly listen to someone, without interrupting, without judging, just offering your compassionate presence. Every small act of detachment from the ego, of quieting the will, is a step towards this internal reconstruction. It's training for the spirit. And this reconstruction, what does it mean in practice? It means less reactivity. It means no longer being a plaything of your emotions and desires. It means finding an inner stability that doesn't depend on external circumstances. When you disappear from the tyranny of your ego, you don't become an apathetic zombie. On the contrary, you become more alive, more conscious, more capable of appreciating beauty and feeling compassion, because you're no longer filtering everything through the distorted lens of, "What's in it for me?" The world's pain still exists, but it doesn't destroy you in the same way, because you've developed an inner fortress. You rebuild yourself on a foundation of greater lucidity and equanimity. It's like learning to sail. At first, any wind destabilizes you, any wave scares you. You fight against the elements, you get tense, exhausted, but over time, you learn to read the wind, to adjust the sails, to flow with the waves. You don't control the ocean, but you learn to navigate it with more grace and less suffering. The Schopenhauerian disappearance is this learning to let go of the ego's illusory control and trust in something deeper, in a wisdom that emerges when the will calms down. This process of vanishing to rebuild is neither easy nor quick. It requires courage to face the shadows of our own minds, to admit the extent of our attachment to suffering, even if unconsciously. It requires discipline to practice detachment in a world that constantly incites us to the contrary. But the promise is immense, a peace that is not of this world, a freedom that cannot be bought or conquered by the force of will. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this message resonates deeply with you. Maybe it's time to subscribe to the channel, so we can continue exploring together these ideas that can transform our perspective on life. And share this video with someone you think might benefit from this reflection. Sometimes the right word, at the right time, can be the catalyst for great change. Think about your greatest current suffering. What desire, what attachment, what fear is feeding this pain? Schopenhauer would invite us to look at it not with judgment, but with investigative curiosity. What would happen if, for a moment, you stopped fighting against it, stopped desperately trying to change the external situation, and simply observed the will in action within you? What would happen if you tried to disappear from the need for things to be different than they are, just for an instant? This isn't about passive resignation, but active wisdom. It's understanding that the real battle is not against the external world, but against the shackles of our own will. By vanishing from these shackles, by weakening the ego's power, we open ourselves to a new way of being, a reconstruction that comes from within, solid and lasting. That bottomless pit of the will begins to lose its power over us, and in place of emptiness, we find fullness, serenity. Perhaps words are not enough to describe it. Schopenhauer offers us a mirror, often uncomfortable, but profoundly honest. He shows us that the desire to disappear from suffering is legitimate, but that the path to it is not escape, but transcendence. It's an invitation to die to the old self, that self enslaved by the will, so that a new self, freer, and more serene, can emerge from the ashes. Imagine a caterpillar. To become a butterfly, it must go through a process of apparent disappearance within the chrysalis. A radical transformation occurs there, in the darkness, in the silence, and what emerges is something completely different, capable of flight, of seeing the world from a totally new perspective. The disappearance Schopenhauer speaks of is this chrysalis. The reconstruction is the butterfly. So, the next time pain grips you, the next time the world seems unbearable, remember this idea. Perhaps the way forward is not to fight harder, want more, be more. Perhaps the way is, paradoxically, a kind of vanishing, a conscious, intentional vanishing from the ego's noise, so you can finally hear the silent melody of your true essence, the one that resides beyond the will. Schopenhauer's philosophy is not a self-help manual with 7 steps to instant happiness. It's a deep dive into the often uncomfortable truths of human existence. But by confronting these truths, by understanding the mechanics of our suffering, we gain the tools for genuine transformation. Not a transformation that makes us someone we're not, but one that reveals who we truly are beneath the layers of accumulated desires and fears. Think about this. What if most of your suffering didn't come from external events, but from your resistance to them, from your incessant will for things to be different? And what if, by disappearing from this resistance, you found a peace that was always there, waiting to be discovered? This is Schopenhauer's invitation, an invitation to stop running, to look within, to dare to disappear from the tumult of the will and find, in that apparent nothingness, the seed of your deepest reconstruction. What do you choose to take from this conversation? What small way of disappearing can you start practicing today to begin or deepen your journey of transformation? Leave the word serenity in the comments if this message touched your heart and if you feel inspired to seek this inner peace that Schopenhauer describes. Your journey is unique, but the search for liberation from suffering is universal. And perhaps, just perhaps, as we learn to vanish a little each day, we can, together, rebuild not only ourselves, but a world with a little more compassion and a little less pain. What is the first step you will take in that direction? The decision, as always, is yours.